Hey there! Today I'm going to give out some secrets, and this is about the type of properties that you want to subject to, right? And these are the best properties for subject to investors. I'm Alicia Cox, and thank you so much for stopping by. Let's just get right into it. The ideal property for the subject to investor is, surprise, surprise, the newer built home. There's nothing to fix. These are the new homes that were built from about 5 years ago, up from now to 5 years ago. And ideally, they should be purchased 1 to 3 years ago. Them being built to 5 years ago, and for them purchasing it 1 to 3 years ago. But I prefer the ones where they bought it like 1 or 2 years ago. That is just perfect. And why? Because number one, the first and foremost reason, look at our economy. Our interest rate is now what? Somewhere around 7.25%, maybe 7.5%, 6% if you have really good credit. So the interest rate is pretty high compared to what it was 2 years ago. So if you were to buy a house that was built and financed 2 years ago, that's a pretty good deal. And here are some other perks. They're going to be in a nice neighborhood. The trees are there. The sidewalk is new. All that stuff is nice. The neighbors have new houses too. So it's usually a nicer neighborhood. It's where people would want to live. There's nothing to fix. Absolutely nothing to fix. I love that one the most. And there's a good chance that the builder warranty is still on the property. So basically you just collect the rent, as soon as you purchase it. You purchase and go. That's what I love. You know what? You can actually buy, a junker. You can buy subject to junkers, and that's a thing. But let me just tell you, it's a whole other category of subject to investing. That's for the fix and flip investor. It requires some skills. It's going to require a little bit more skill and good knowledge of the market for it to work properly for you. Yeah, among other things that you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know how to fix things too. But if you're going to take over an older home, right? And so I'm not even just talking about junkers, but if you're going to take over an older home, make sure that it is in good repair and it is well maintained, because you don't want something that you have to fix before you can lease out, because fixing something is just going to cost you a lot of time. It's going to cost you some cash, and ain't nobody got time for that. It's going to cost you some time, and it's going to cost you some cash, and that's going to slow you down. You can't afford to miss a beat. Not in this business, because remember, you are taking over somebody else's loan and making a promise to make the payments. Unless you got money to burn, you know what I mean? Then you can do whatever you want, But for me, I need to take them over subject to and go. So where is the sweet spot I'm talking about? Where is it? All right. So the sweet spot is in the newer priced home, right? But it's in a range of a price category. So, when you have, you're in a given area, there's always going to be the lower end price and the higher end price for the median price home. There's going to be a medium price range, let's say, for people in the area. Mostly, maybe everybody wants to buy a lesser expensive house, right? But there are some people, well-to-do people, who don't want the lower end stuff. They're not starter home material. They want the higher end stuff. Not $1 million, because that's another category. But we're talking about the executive style home. So for example, if you're in an area, a given area, $200,000 of the newer priced home, $200,000 is the lower end of the newer priced home. And let's say $800,000 going up to $800,000 of the newer home. So you've got the lower end, 200,000. That's the entry. This is the starter home. That's what they call it, starter home. People coming out of apartments and they're saying, okay, I want to buy a house finally. I got a few dollars saved up. I want to buy a house. they usually look in that price range. And investors usually look in that price range too, because, it's a lower end, easier to finance home. Then you've got the higher end, which is 800,000. So there's a big range there. You could say 200,000 to maybe 400, maybe 350,000 is where most people spend their money when it comes to buying house. And then you're going to have the 400,000 to 800, and that is more the executive style homes, and that you're going to find on the hills, by the water, in exclusive neighborhoods, gated communities. Then you say, which range is it a sweet spot? From my experience, the sweet spot is going to be around 600,000, 500,000, right in there. Not quite high, not quite low, but right on the higher end of the median price range. Not as high as the highest end, but on the higher end. Why? Because that is the price range that you want your buyers to come from. And the buyers that want to buy in that area, in that price range, that's the buyer you want to buy. All right, so let me explain this a little further. Why? The most important lesson that I've learned in real estate has got to be this. You want to sell to people who have money. Really. So you want to sell to people who have money. It's just easier. Really easier. It's not a novel idea. Yes, I know it's not. They have said this from ages past. It's not a novel idea. But if you'll just employ this simple little truth in your business, no matter what it is that you're selling, you'll find that you're just going to get things going much easier. It's just going to be much easier for you. And guess what? You'll actually eat better too. So here's what's going to happen if you were to sell to people on the lower end of the new homes category. First of all, when you're trying to get say you're doing a lease option, right? When you're trying to get your option deposit, it's going to be like pulling teeth, because people don't necessarily have all of the cash, because remember, these are starter homes, starter families. They usually don't have the cash like that. So then for the starter homes though, the starter families, they require a lower entry fee. So that means you're going to have to compromise and say, I'm going to have to charge less option deposit. So we usually charge around $10,000 minimum to get into our homes. But maybe it depends on the area. Maybe you can only get 5,000. And maybe 5,000 is okay for you. But in my area, that's like, a lease deposit. But we're looking for an option deposit, which is different. My experience is that working with tenants on the starter home category, I'm gonna not get all of my option deposit, and then I'm gonna have to finance it, and that's, in other words, I'm gonna have to take a promissory note for a balance that they owe me. So if they come in, let's say my fee is $10,000 that they have to come into my home, they may have $5,000 or something, then I'm taking back a note for $5,000. And what happens now is that the $10,000 I'm supposed to get like today, when I lease the property, it's probably going to take me a year, right? Because then maybe we might say, let's spread this over a year for when you'll just break up the payments and pay me. They may or may not be able to do that. And my thing is, if you're trying to make it affordable for them to stay there, I don't want people paying me their money and then picking up and leaving because they can't afford the house. Their option deposit is non-refundable. I don't want any problems. So I'd rather lease it to people who can actually afford it, right? So that means that they're going to stick around. But if they have to pay an extra fee for this deposit, on top of their lease payments, then I'm just thinking it's going to be too taxing for them, and it's going to cause problems for us later. So I don't recommend it for you to finance your down deposits at all. So as I said before, you're probably better off working with people who can afford to pay you your deposits. It's a better strategy. Unless you decide, you know what, I'm going to do the lower end because that's what's available in my area. I've got all these, houses, that are new and they're lower end. They're the starter homes in my area. And since there's a lot of them and I can get them easily subject to, then that's what I'm going to do. Then, hey, go for it. Know that you're going to get a lower deposit, and know that if you decide that you're going to just lease them out, straight lease, that you may get a trashed house. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I'm sorry. But here's what happens. If you don't charge enough going in, right, then somehow the house gets trashed. And these people don't really care because they don't have anything in it. So then there's nothing to lose. You're probably better off just not, doing a straight lease, or at least getting a good deposit. And definitely accept pets. You can't be like, oh no, I don't accept pets. You need to accept pets. People have pets. Us Americans, we love our pets. And maybe you might want to stipulate, no crocodiles or, no pit bulls or whatever. That's the normal thing. So that's going to be up to you. I don't know about you, but I need my money now. In order to get your money right, you could try to attract buyers in the price range that you can get payments for. So yeah, just attract buyers in the price ranges that you want. And in order to attract them, you could maybe target a particular group of people, such as maybe small business owners. For example, you can attract them and then put ads in their papers, whether it's an ethnic thing or whether it's a professional thing. Then you would put, let's say, legal papers, and you put the advertisements in their neighborhood so that you will attract those kinds of buyers. In my experience, I found that the small business owner and the paraprofessionals are notorious for wanting a nice house, executive style house, that they don't have the credit for. So I can't say they can't afford it, because they know what they can afford. But they don't have the credit for. Because here's what happens. Their business owner, they have to personally sign on the dotted line every time the business needs something. So if it's a credit for a manufacturer or credit for maybe a new equipment or something, they have to personally put their credit on the line and sign as the guarantor for whatever it is that they're trying to buy, right? And so that makes their credit look really challenged, that, and God forbid the business could be late on any payment. So, they're notorious for not having good credit, but they have the cash. They make the cash. They throw off a lot of cash. But nobody is looking at that. All these lenders are looking for, oh, you got to have this credit or that credit. And it's like, maybe you need to relax that a little bit, but who cares about them? We're filling this gap. And when I discovered this, it was like my aha moment. I was like, oh, so that's how it is. Really? So if you take try it. I mean, you've got nothing to lose anyways, just try it. So it looks like this. You could just put an ad and attract them, and then pre-qualify them and have them ready for your deals. So that's how you do it. So I tested this theory, and I tested this theory with a house here in Southern California where I live. And this property was in the hills of Malibu. And I said, let me just go call this owner and see what they would accept. So I'm a subject to investor, right? And so I called and I said, hi. And I did my scripting, and I spoke to them. They were nice. They did not want to accept a subject to deal. But this owner was open to seller financing in another way, like contract for deed, that. So he was open to seller financing, and he was even open to a lease option. So what's a girl to do? I negotiated some money here. So the property was around $2 million, around that price range. He would accept, the lowest amount he would accept is $25,000 down and $15,000 per month in payment. So I said, that sounds like a deal. What I did though is before I inked it, I went ahead and looked for a buyer. Yes, I went to look for buyers because at that time I did not have buyers in that price range. So I looked for the buyer, and lo and behold, I got 3 calls, not 2, 3 calls, about 3 calls. I think I remember 3 calls. And what's interesting though is normally I would get a bunch of realtor calls in there, and I would get wholesalers and, other investors calling, curious or whatever. I did not get any of those calls, but I got some less calls than I normally got. And these couple 3 calls that I got came from people who were interested in leasing this place for themselves. Of course, I interviewed everybody on the phone. The first person said he wanted it for himself. When I began to ask him how much money he had to put down, he said whatever is required. And that was it was so refreshing to hear. And it was, I didn't have to talk about financing or anything like that. It was music to my ears. It was music to my ears. So that works out pretty well. Then the next person that called was a woman that, she had a lot of questions. Where is it? How is it? How high is it? How many square footage? All of these things. And wanted to know, but I was quite happy to give her all of this information that she wanted. And so when I presented the amount of money that I wanted, by the way, I wanted $50,000 down, and I wanted $18,000 per month. And both people had no problems with the deposit, and they had no problem with paying the monthly amount. Of course, I proceeded to qualify them. For the woman, though, I think she was quite interesting to me. She had a secretary, I think, that got on the phone before her or introduced her, whatever. And then after, so she said, you need to check her out. Just check us out. So I said, okay, check that out, whatever, She turned out to be a famous dating coach that had an online matchmaking service. And so I thought, okay, she's able to rent my place. And that was such a nice thing to be able to do. And another thing too, you're working with people on a different level. And it's such a nice thing to be able to meet interesting people. So, wow. All I can say is you have to keep going with your subject to business. Keep trying to find your sweet spot. Hopefully that helped you. This is Alicia Cox. Join us over at mycashflowuniversity.com, where we will go over tips and strategies to help you with enriching your real estate portfolio. So thank you so much for watching, and